Here we're finding coterminal angles, but this time for angles that are measured in radians. And this asks us to find a positive and a negative coterminal angle. So we're going to have two answers for this. So when we were doing coterminal angles measured in degrees, we were adding and subtracting 360. So let's see, maybe I'll write this up here. But this time we are measured in radians instead of degrees. So instead of adding and subtracting 360, I'm going to add and subtract the radian equivalent of that, which is 2 pi. So in degrees, coterminal angles are every 360. For radians, 2 pi, that's the same as 360. So in radian measure, instead of adding and subtracting 360, I'm adding and subtracting 2 pi. All right, so that's going to involve some fractions here. I'm finding a positive and a negative coterminal angle for each. Pi over 2, that's a positive number, so I will probably have to subtract to get negative and add to get positive. So I'm going to go pi over 2. And I'm going to need to add and subtract 2 pi. So let's get a positive. Let's go plus 2 pi. All right, but I've got fractions here. So let's make this 2 pi over 1. And get some common denominators. I want this one to have a same denominator as that, so I'm going to multiply this times 2 over 2. All right, so instead of adding 2 pi with common denominators, I'm really adding 4 pi over 2. So I'm adding 2 pi, pi over 2 plus 2 pi, common denominators, and then this is 1 pi over 2 plus 4 pi over 2, 5 pi over 2. So that's my positive coterminal angle. Just like when we were doing in degrees, we just added 360. Now in radians, 360 is really 2 pi, so I'm adding 2 pi. So that was my positive angle. To get a negative angle, I will need to subtract. So I'm going to do the same setup here, but subtract. Pi over 2 minus 2 pi. So that's pi over 2 minus 2 pi over 1. This will be the same common denominator situation here. Then I've got 1 pi over 2 minus 4 pi over 2. I've got 1 pi minus 4 pi. That's negative 3 pi over 2. And that is my negative coterminal. All right, sure, let's do a couple more of these. So all of these, no matter what, we are adding or subtracting 2 pi in either direction until we answer the question that it asked. So we are finding a positive and a negative coterminal. This one, negative 3 pi over 4, that's already negative. So I'm going to add 2 pi and subtract 2 pi. But let's go ahead and make that 2 pi over 1. And then in order to subtract these, I need common denominators. So I need these to be denominators of 4. All right, negative 3 pi plus 8 pi, that is 5 pi over 4. Okay, so I've got a positive answer here. And then negative 3 pi over 4 minus 8 pi over 4, that's negative 11 pi over 4. Last one of these, I'm going to start with the same setup. Excuse me. I'm going to start with the same setup, where I'm going to add and subtract. And then fractions of 1. And I want common denominators of 3. All right, so I'm ready to get some answers here. I added 2 pi, so I went around once in the positive direction. 8 pi over 3 plus 6 pi over 3. That is a whopping 14 pi over 3. It's a great positive answer. All right, then over here I have 8 pi over 3 minus 6 pi over 3, so I went around in the other direction. But that is positive 2 pi over 3. So that is a coterminal angle. That's great. But that's also positive. So the instructions were to find a positive and a negative. And technically now I found 2 positive angles. So I was hoping to get a negative one here when I subtracted. And if I didn't, then I'm going to have to subtract again. So I went around once, but it wasn't yet negative. So I'm going to have to take this angle that I landed on and subtract again. So I'm going to subtract another 2 pi. That's like going around an extra 360. So same thing, fractions of 1, and then common denominators. And I get negative 4 pi over 3. So all these are coterminal, but finally here I landed on one that was negative. So this asked me to find a positive and a negative here, and technically I found 2 positives on accident on my way to a negative. So I'm adding and subtracting 2 pi, and then making those fractions 2 pi over 1 so I can get common denominators. And then here I added to get positive 14 pi over 3. That's a positive answer. Terrific. Here I subtracted hoping to get a negative, but I landed on another positive. So both great positive answers, but I wanted a negative, so I needed to take this one where I'd subtracted and subtract again another 2 pi from 2 pi over 3. Common denominators, and I finally landed on a negative answer. So just like these ones where I had a positive answer and a negative answer, here I have a positive and a negative. I actually just accidentally have 2 positives. So if all it wanted was 1 positive and 1 negative, you wouldn't need to list both, but you could.